الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue 7:08 p.m. Thursday, August the 4th, 2022, where it agrees on the Tariq al-Hijri, the Islamic calendar, what is the 5th of Muharram. The 5th of Muharram on this evening of Thursday, Yom al-Khamis, al-Muwafiq li 6 Muharram, بالتاريخ الهجري والعام كم؟ عام 1444 1444 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. After we continue in this tremendous treatise by the great Imam Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Abu al-Abbas Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abd al-Halim Ibn Abd al-Salam Ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani al-Dimashqi al-Numayri rahimahullah, died 728 after the migration of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We continue in this book. We were discussing the affair. We were breaking or categorizing those characteristics of Allah. We said that we would discuss the other category. We continue from where we left yesterday. We were discussing the affairs that all of the characteristics are of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His beautiful names and lofty attributes. All of them in its origin are what they call khabari or khabariyah, meaning that these affairs in its origin are all revelation that was revealed from Allah. Whether it be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's face, or His hands, or the feet, or the shin, and the likes of those characteristics. Or if you want to say, for example, Allah being all hearing, all seeing, all knowledgeable, all aware. All of these characteristics in this origin, as we mentioned last class, all of it in this origin are khabariyah. All of it in their origin are khabari. We spoke about the first category of characteristics of Allah, which is what they call as-sifat al-khabariyah al-mahdha. Characteristics of Allah that's purely revelation, meaning we will have no way of knowing at all that Allah has that characteristic unless Allah revealed it to us. And we gave an example of that, such as sifat al-dhahik, or sifat al-farh, or sifat al-ghadab, or sifat al-rida. For example, the characteristic of Allah's laughter, or the characteristic of Allah being amazed, or the characteristic of Allah's anger. And the likes of those characteristics, what they call as-sifat al-khabariyah al-mahdha. That's what we discussed yesterday. So let's move on to the next. Then you have what they call as-sifat al-khabariyah al-aqliyah. Characteristics of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala that in its origin it's khabari. Khabari meaning it was conveyed through revelation. Khabari meaning khabar, meaning what was conveyed. Conveyed through what, everyone? Conveyed through revelation. However, at the same time, even though they're khabari, it can be affirmed by the intellect, even though the intellect is not the origin. And that's our point of discussion for today. What they call khabariyah dhatiyah. Characteristics of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala that are from His essence. It was conveyed through revelation, and at the same time it can be affirmed by the intellect, even though it's not, or the affirmation of the intellect is not its origin. For example, what are those characteristics that are khabari, that was conveyed through revelation, it is from His essence, meaning Allah will always have those characteristics. They will never go away. There's not a moment from the moment in time except Allah always sees everything. Allah always hears everything. Or Allah will have the characteristic of wajh, of face, and the characteristic of al-yadayn, the two hands that befit Him, and the foot, and the fingers and the likes of those characteristics are what they call sifat khabariyah. Characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are sifat khabariyah dhatiyah aqliyah. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry everyone. That was khabariyah dhatiyah. I'm sorry everyone. I will go back again. Khabariyah dhatiyah. Khabariyah fi'liyah or khabariyah dhatiyah. Where is everybody tonight? Oh. I'll start again. Let me start over again, everyone. Let's start from the beginning. Where we left off yesterday, we spoke about the category which is characteristics of Allah, that's pure revelation. Those characteristics of Allah that's pure revelation, such as the characteristics of Allah as laughter. For example, Allah ascending, or the descension of Allah, or Allah coming on the day of resurrection. Another example of what they call khabariyya dhatiyya, meaning which is pure revelation, is also those characteristics that are from His essence, such as al-wajh, the face of Allah, the two hands of Allah, the fingers of Allah, and the eyes of Allah. We would not have no way of knowing that Allah has those characteristics except in revelation. That's what we mentioned in brief yesterday. Right. Let's move on to the second category. The second category is what they call as-sifat al-khabariyya al-aqliyya, characteristics of Allah Ta'ala that are khabari and aqli together, meaning they are characteristics of Allah that they were conveyed through revelation, but at the same time they can be affirmed by the intellect, even though the intellect is not its origin. What do we mean by that? Meaning, if there wasn't a text, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all able, the characteristic of qudra, Allah's complete ability, or that Allah intends, meaning what He wants in certain affairs, of allowing to happen, of good and evil, or that Allah is all hearing and all seeing, and that Allah is all knowledgeable and He's all wise. Let's just say that there wasn't a text that came, even though it is. A text conveying these type of characteristics that I just mentioned, for example. The intellect would be able to what? Affirm it. How? Use it as an evidence, al-ayat al-kawniyah, the amazing signs within the creation. Meaning, using as an evidence the remarkable creation. This perfect, amazing creation around us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He brought into existence and what He brings out of existence into existence and vice versa. Which is an indication of the characteristic of what? Ability. Meaning, it can be affirmed by the mind, even though it's not its origin. And when you see the diversity of so many creatures, of how Allah created, you see the amazing, remarkable creation. When you look at some of the birds and its colors, and you see the diversity of them, what certain colors have, or some animals have that variety, some of them have their different shapes, their different sizes, their colors, all of those affairs. All of them are indication where the mind can affirm for the Creator al-qudra, absolute perfect ability. And at the same time, due to the diversity of what you see within the creation, from shapes, sizes, and colors, the mind can also indicate or affirm that the Creator also has knowledge of what He's creating. And at the same time, when you look at the creation around you and the amazing, remarkable way in which Allah has created His creation, the mind can also affirm that this Creator also has the characteristic of life, meaning He's alive, subhanahu. So all of these characteristics, or for example, we could give another example just for extra clarity. What takhsis, the particularization, meaning Allah gave certain abilities to certain people and others did not have that ability, which is an indication that Allah intends, He wants certain things in a certain way. And you'll find that those affairs can be affirmed likewise by what? Intellect, and at the same time the diversity of certain things happening, in which certain people were given and certain people were not given certain affairs, also is an indication of knowledge. So all of these are characteristics, what they call sifat khabariyah aqliyah ma'an. Characteristics of Allah Ta'ala that is affirmed through revelation, and it can be affirmed by what, everyone? By the mind, taking consideration that the intellect is not the origin. Is it clear? So هذا الإبداع, this remarkable way, and this origination that we see, which is unprecedented, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the originator of the heavens and the earth. When you look at it, and the sequence and the system, and how systematic it is, when we say systematic, meaning you see that Allah ta'ala has given the human being 2 eyes. You see that Allah ta'ala has given every human being what? 5 fingers. And the exception to that is not what's considered what? The overall ruling, because we know that's called a what? A defect. The reason why something's called the defect is because we know the original thing is what? 2 eyes. Or else when a person has 1 or 2, it's called a deformity. Or if they have 3 or 4, it's called a what? Deformity. So the origin is that human beings were created all over the world, which in most cases with what? 2 eyes. And 2 ears. It's in a sequence. Why do I say sequence, everyone? Because if it was left chaotically or haphazardly or coincidentally, as they say, then certain people will have 10 eyes. Certain people will have 50. Certain people will have 80 eyes. And the head wouldn't be on a certain place above the shoulders. Notice that the head was placed at a certain place. Where? Above your shoulders. There was arms. 5 fingers for each what? Limb. For each arm. 5 toes. That's what Ibn Kathir and the ulama mentioned, that it was done in a sequence. To let you know, by the mind, you can affirm what? These type of characteristics, that He intends, and He has all knowledge, and the magnificent, remarkable creation of the heavens and the earth, from the night and the day, and those matters, and the time, also indicates another characteristic, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala absolute perfect wisdom. And His remarkable what? Ability. These characteristics are called as-sifat al-aqliyah al-khabariyah. These type of characteristics are called characteristics that are conveyed through revelation, and they can be affirmed by the intellect, even though the intellect is not its origin. For verily, those who negate these characteristics without making distinction between as-sifat al-khabariyah was-sifat al-aqliyah, these type of what? Characteristics of what we mentioned before I move on to the new point, before to the next point. Does everyone understand the point that I just made, or do I need to what? Repeat it? If the people didn't understand, I'll repeat it again. One more time, and I'll repeat it in summary. The first category that we covered yesterday was called as-sifat al-khabariyah al-mahdha. Characteristics of Allah that's pure revelation. Meaning the intellect cannot affirm it at all. Those characteristics, as I said yesterday, also breaks down into 2 categories. Those categories, what they call as-sifat what? Al-fi'liyah al-khabariyah al-mahdha was-sifat al-dhatiyah al-khabariyah al-mahdha. Those characteristics that are pure revelation. From them is Allah's actions, meaning Allah ascension, Allah's ascension, meaning ascending above the throne. Allah's descension, meaning Allah descending in the third last part of the night, every night. And Allah coming on the day of resurrection. What are those type of characteristics, everyone? They're actions. Actions Allah does when He wills, or does it when He wills. Those characteristics, we would not know those characteristics of Allah, about our Lord, unless Allah informed us through revelation. There's no way that the mind or the intellect can affirm that at all. That same category, such as al-sifat al-khabariyat al-fi'liyat al-mahda, those characteristics of Allah Ta'ala, meaning His actions that are pure revelation, we just gave examples of that. At the same time, we have the second category of al-sifat al-khabariyah al-mahda, which is also dhatiyah, meaning the characteristics of Allah that's pure revelation. However, these characteristics are not His actions, rather they are from His essence. For example, His face, His two hands, the fingers of Allah, the foot of Allah, the shin of Allah. We will have no knowledge of those affairs of what, unless Allah informed us through revelation. That's what we covered in brief yesterday. Let's move on to the new category. The new category of today is what they call al-sifat al-khabariyah al-aqliyah ma'an. The characteristics of Allah that are informed or conveyed to us through revelation. And at the same time, the human mind can affirm it, even though it's not its origin. It's not the origin we rely on. The origin or the affair that we rely on is revelation. But at the same time, we still what? Can affirm it with the mind. You'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to reflect on His creation, to use our mind, and use our what? Our intellects to reflect upon the amazing, remarkable creation He has made, so it can indicate towards something important. What is that important thing? Number one, Allah's rububiyyah, and Allah's uluhiyyah, and Allah's characteristic of al-asma wa sifat. And here in this instance, you're using your intellect in its proper place. Here in this instance, you're using your intellect in its proper place. Why? Because you're using your mind to affirm these affairs and submit to the revelation, not to oppose it. So that's the reason why we say Allah Ta'ala, or these characteristics of this second category, as we mentioned, that these type of characteristics in its origin are all khabari. They're all revelation. But at the same time, the mind can affirm it, even though it's not its origin. Is it clear, everyone? From those examples, it's like I said, if you look to the remarkable creation of Allah and how amazing it is. If you look to certain animals have beautiful colors. Certain fish have certain shapes and sizes and colors and abilities. And Allah even made certain fish to have what? Electricity. Allah has made so many ways and so many things that are astonishing to the human mind. You see the beautiful colors, you see the shapes, you see the sizes. They indicate certain characteristics of Allah by the mind. Such as that Allah, when He creates, He has knowledge of what He's created. So He has the characteristic of ilm. So it can be affirmed by the what? By the mind. Even though the intellect is not the foundation. For example, you see what Allah Ta'ala, how He creates from non-existence into existence, and He makes them in certain forms, shapes, sizes, and colors. And Allah particularizes certain creatures and animals and human beings with certain characteristics that others do not have. Some of them have the characteristics of what? Some of them just rely clearly or solely on their hearing. For example, bats. They don't see. They're blind. How do they see? Through what? Their hearing. All these are different what? Indications to show that whoever created it knew what they were creating. And they take away certain abilities for a reason, which can point towards other characteristics of Allah, such as wisdom. Or certain characteristics of Allah, such as what He wants and what He intends. There's no way this can be out of what? Out of so-called coincidence. It's impossible. for these shapes, sizes, and colors, and how the human being was created, his head will be put on top of his shoulders, and his two eyes will be put on his face so he can see in front of him. And he will have 5 fingers, which is an indication that the characteristic of Allah, that he intends, and that Allah wants certain affairs in a certain way, and that Allah Ta'ala is fully capable, and at the same time he has knowledge of what he's creating, and at the same time he has wisdom behind why he creates. Those affairs, brothers and sisters, are called as-sifat al-khabariyya al-aqliyya ma'an. They are called characteristics of Allah that was conveyed through revelation, but at the same time they can be affirmed by the intellect, even though the intellect is not its origin that we rely on. Is it clear or not clear? Sure? Genius. So those are the affairs that we're what? Speaking about. So you have as-sifat al-khabariyya al-mahdha, and the second category is what they call as-sifat al-khabariyya al-aqliyya ma'an. Characteristics of our Lord that we affirm for him, that all of it, but if you want to just summarize all these characteristics, all of them in its origin, everyone is what? Khabari, meaning it was conveyed through revelation. All of it. All the characteristics of Allah in its origin are all khabariyya. We rely on revelation, meaning the kitab and the sunnah, in order to affirm for Allah Ta'ala these characteristics. That's the origin of all the characteristics of Allah Ta'ala. However, when we categorized and broke them down for a little bit of clarification, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his book tells us to reflect on the creation. He tells us to what? Reflect, meaning use your mind. However, here when you're using your mind, you're using it where? In its proper place. You're using it to affirm the most important and vital of all affairs, which are that Allah is the Lord. He deserves to be worshipped as the one who can do this, and he has names and attributes that we affirm for him based upon revelation, and the intellect can affirm it even though the intellect is not its foundation. Is it clear, everyone? So let's move on to the next point. Those who negate these characteristics of Allah without making the distinction between what we just mentioned, so for example, as-sifat al-khabariyya was-sifat al-aqliyya. Now before I wanted to go into this point, the majority of the Muslim world, we know, carry the belief of what, everyone? Al-Ash'ariyya, al-aqidah al-Ash'ariyya. The majority of the Muslim world have adopted the belief of what they call al-Ash'ariyya. The category we just discussed, what we call it as-sifat al-khabariyya al-aqliyya together, right, everyone? You'll find that the Ash'ariyya, that they call it, these characteristics, as-sifat al-aqliyya. The characteristic that are affirmed by the mind. That's what they call it. That's what the Ash'ariyya call it. Not what we call it. We call it what? Just like we just mentioned, as-sifat al-khabariyya al-aqliyya. Characteristics that was conveyed through revelation, even though the mind can affirm it, but it's not its foundation. That's how we say it. However, the majority of the Muslim world have adopted the aqidah of the Ash'ariyya. The Ash'aris call this category that we call it with another title. What's that title, everyone? As-sifat al-aqliyya. They call it the characteristic of which the human mind affirms, or the intellect affirms. Why do they call it that? Because their origin is that they what? They rely on the human mind as the foundation, not the revelation. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? That's why they call it sifat aqliyya. Because the foundation with them is not revelation. The foundation with them is the what? The human mind and the intellect. That's why they call it the intellectual characteristics of Allah Ta'ala, meaning what the mind can affirm. You'll find that they call it another title, which is called sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat al-ma'ani. They call it the characteristic of al-ma'ani, of meanings. Is it clear, everyone, what I'm saying? The thing of why we're mentioning this, everyone, is for clarification. For what? To let one know that the correct creed of the Muslim, they make their revelation its foundation in all the names and characteristics of Allah. Hence, you'll find that the people who are upon what is incorrect make their intellects the foundation of what they affirm or negate from Allah. Their foundation is the mind. Our foundation is what? Revelation. Is it clear so far what I'm saying? G. These type of affairs, as we clarify, this distinction of what, or this clarity that we gave and details we gave momentarily or a moment ago, these characteristics, you'll find that those who do not make the distinction between what we just said are called the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila do not make any these differences and distinctions that we just mentioned at all. There isn't any. A person might say some from the Muslims might say, you people, people of the Sunnah, people who study Aqidah, you waste your time. There's no Mu'tazila today. Mu'tazila don't exist. Why do you waste your time even mentioning these people? Why don't you take advantage of other things that are more important? And we say, there is no deviant sect, what they call ta'ifatun qa'imatun bihaddi dhatiha tusama al-mu'tazila. Or ta'ifatun mustaqillatun liwahdiha tusama al-mu'tazila. There is no group specifically these days and times called the Mu'tazila. However, we study their ideologies because they still exist. How do they exist, everyone? They exist, they're still present to today. In who? Who are they? All of the deviant sects of the Shia carry the aqeedah of the Mu'tazila. All of them. Starting with those who are the extremists from amongst them, ending off with the Mu'tazileen, for those who are truly upon that aqeedah. All of these groups are upon the methodology of i'tizal, of the deviant sect called the Mu'tazila. Meaning, you'll find in the history, if you study, during the days of Al-Khalifat al-Ma'mun wal-Mu'tasim wal-Wathiq, you'll find that those who are called the Khulafa that had adopted the what? They are called the successors or the leaders that had adopted the Aqidah of the Mu'tazila. Until the belief of the Mu'tazila became enforced upon the people to adopt it. What happened was, when it was adopted and enforced, or rather was imposed by force upon the people to adopt it and believe it, the deviant sects from the Shia and the Khawarij studied it. They studied it and they adopted it. So to this day, all the deviant sects from the Shia, their present location is in Iran. It's not just in Iran today. It's also in Yemen, with the Houthis, with the Houthiyin, and in Lebanon. They're spread out. What happened in Egypt, they started to come out. That's a long story. I don't want to go too far into that. But anyway, you'll find from that what happened, majority of the Shia are in present days where located in Iran. And in the Houthis, which is in Yemen, and some of the places in Lebanon and other places in Lebanon, where you'll find the group called Hizbullah. The Hizbullah, who were so-called the people of Allah, were all connected with the Shia of today. And the majority of you'll find of terrorism all traces back to the Shia, especially these days. They are the ones who funds it, monetarily assists the ideologies of the Khawarij and terrorism, and instilling horror and fright and fear amongst societies. They're the ones that have the what? They're associated and connected with it. That's why the people of the Sunnah, one of the reasons why the people of the Sunnah detest the Shia, based upon the fact that their whole religion is built upon hypocrisy, lying, and deception. Their whole belief is built upon it. Who will want to associate with somebody whose belief in its origin is built upon these type of evil traits? Who would in their right mind would want to associate with someone like that? Their whole belief is built upon hypocrisy, deception, cheating, and being what? Treacherous. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? طيب. The Shia of today carry the Aqidah of the Mu'tazila. They carry the Aqidah of what, everyone? The Mu'tazila. And the Khawarij of today. You'll find that the majority of them carry the what? The Aqidah to the Khawarij of the past, rather. The majority of the Khawarij of today, the people with government, are usually Ikhwanis. But anyway, we're all connected. Because the Ikhwanis also are connected with the Shia. But anyway, you'll find that the Shia carried the Aqidah of the Mu'tazila. Even me, when I was in school years ago, after I was in high school, when I was a new Shahada, and I was next to someone, and they would call the Adhan very strange. And I was very stunned by the Adhan. Then he started saying certain affairs about Allah Ta'ala not being above. So I asked him, I said, what are you? And then he started, what really made him stand out? He started talking about Abu Hurairah. About Abu Hurairah, how he's a liar and things like that. So I looked at him, I'm like, who are you? So then I found out he was what? He was Shi'i. He was Shi'i, and he had the belief of the Mu'tazila. So that's how you could connect the dots. I was like, oh, now it makes sense. Now, back then it didn't make sense to me, because I was a new Muslim. Now it makes sense today. Oh, he was Shi'i, and the Shia carried the belief of who? The Mu'tazila. Is it clear, everyone? طيب. So you'll find, like we said, all of the devious sects of today, or that are present today, from the Shia, carry the Aqidah of the Mu'tazila. طيب. If we give an exception to the Ash'ari, in which now you'll find that we are clarifying their belief, because during the time of Shaykh al-Islam, this is what Shaykh al-Islam, his focus was upon. And you'll find all of those books in history based upon all these deviant sects, whether it be Mu'tazila, Ash'ari, to the end of it. However, majority of them in the past, especially pertaining to the Shia, they were upon this type of Aqidah. However, a person would say, another person might come with the question, are the Ash'ari present today? We say yes. And their books are what? Present. And that was the fitna of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah during his time. His time was clarifying to the Muslims the correct belief, because the majority of the Muslims during his time were affected by the Aqidah of the Ash'ari, and the people thought that they were Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They thought that they were the people of the Sunnah and the people of the truth. Shaykh al-Islam had taken upon himself to clarify, yes, they are the closest to the people of the truth. He said they are the closest at that particular time. That they were the closest to the people of the truth, that's why you became fooled by them. But they're still not from them. But however, when a person comes in the form of looking what's the closest, a person outside looking in, or a person that doesn't have much knowledge, would think that they're what? The people of the truth. That's why Shaykh al-Islam, like we said, during his time, he had taken it upon himself to clarify the errors that they possess in their fundamental beliefs, to make the distinction that they are not from the people of the truth, even though relatively speaking they are the closest to the people of the truth, even though they're not from them. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Jane. So you'll find, like we said, based upon the different di'ayat, the different type of advertisements that were made. And we know di'ayat, things that which the people circulate, or what we know, shi'arat, things that you will hear constantly, where it becomes prevalent and famous, and certain claims that become prevalent and famous amongst the people, switches the facts, and people become affected by it. And that's why it's taking place. And that's what we see still to this day taking place. How people are affected by what? Advertisements, things that just are become known because it's become widespread, until the people just what? As they say, flow along with the wave. Even though in reality, if they were to study and take time to really investigate for themselves and scrutinize, they will find that all the majority, if not all of those affairs, rather all of those affairs are what? Incorrect, and they just mere what? false notions that have been spread, and it affected the people. And that's what Shaykh al-Islam realized. That's why he took the responsibility to what? Clarify it. To the majority of his books, you'll find his focus was on the Ash'ariyah. Why? Because the people thought that they were the people of the truth, because of the beliefs that they had were the closest to them. And the closest to them, who resemble, they are the ones that are most dangerous upon the Muslims. And the same thing also takes place today. You'll find that people still are being fooled by those who resemble the people of Sunnah. They look so close, it's hard to make the distinction. They sound so similar in what they say in their statements. They sound so close. If a person did not have in-depth knowledge and fear of Allah so they can know who's who, they will fall victim to these people. That's the same fitna of today. The fitna of today, even though during that time, during Shaykh al-Islam, it was more knowledge-based. Knowledge-based where they use books and scholastic-based so-called literature, to now scholastically have discussions and debates which clarify the truth. These days and times, a lot of people, to me, in my opinion, humble opinion, people use emotions too much. They rely on their emotions and how they feel without looking to the facts. That's the days we live in. I feel. Well, I feel, that's the problem. The more we get away from the Asr Nubuwah, the time of prophethood, the further we get away from it, is the more that people go away from facts and they rely on their what? Their whims, their desires, and their emotions to be the judge in affairs. That's the problem. And we know the great Imam Muhammad al-Jami, he says this. He said, بناء على الدعاية الطويلة العريضة التي عمت الدنيا الدعاية تقلب الحقائق الدعاية قد تقلب النحاس ذهبا سبحان الله والذهب نحاسا. He said claims and advertisements. Advertisements can flip the facts and flip the realities and turn them and switch them. He said advertisements conflict, for example, brass into gold and gold into brass. He said likewise advertisement للعقيدة الأشعرية بأنها عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة لبست على الناس وأوهمت كثيرا من المسلمين بأنها وحدها هي عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. He said, based upon advertisements and propaganda and widespread miscellaneous flipped facts, what happened? And also, like we said, the false notions and perverted meanings in the different types of the defamation of the people of Sunnah, and them relying on these type of matters is what caused everything to be what? Mixed. Until it became something obscure upon the people. And it gave the false notion to a lot of the Muslims that they were the people of the Sunnah, the people of what? Of the Jama'ah, meaning those who followed the Sahaba, which it wasn't the case. Like we talked about before, بعد أن تبنتها دولة الموحدين في المغرب ودافعت عنها وقاتلت دونها وقتلت أمما بسببها انتشرت في العالم. You'll find what had become, even in Maghrib, how the aqidah of the Ash'ariyah became widespread. So you'll find that they say the Dawlat al-Muwahhideen fil Maghrib, they also did the exact same thing. They defended it, they fought people to establish their so-called perverted belief, and they also fought and killed nations because of it. That's why these affairs of perverted understandings became widespread within the lands of the Muslims. He said for that reason you'll find that the common folk from the students, that it's obligatory it's befitting that the people treat them in a manner that's gentle. For those students that have been fooled, have some type of gentleness with them, meaning from the common folk. Giving them da'wah. But at the same time, not compromising your belief, where you now have become with them. And that's what you see today. People say they use the so-called ways of we're calling them to the truth, and you haven't seen none of them change yet. Rather, they're changing you, and you're becoming like them. That's what you'll find, ya ma'ashul ikhwa, until you have gentleness with the common folk from amongst them, of course, by giving them certain pamphlets, calling them, inviting them, for those who have the ability, of course. But this is not for everyone, because certain people are weak. Certain people are weak, they'll end up what? Falling into the trap. So you'll find that the closest, like we said, in which you'll find the great Imam Muhammad ibn al-Jami said this exact same point, calling them to Minhaj al-Salaf. This is what Shaykh al-Islam had mentioned in so many of his books, explaining these affairs, and that the majority of the Muslims of today have been affected by this particular aqidah, because we live in these societies where the majority of perverted misunderstandings and ideologies have been widespread and has affected the Muslims. And the Muslims, you'll find, based upon ignorance, they'll judge the people based upon usually affairs of dunya. They'll say so-and-so has a nice car, so-and-so has a nice house, so-and-so has this wide spread, and they also judge based upon numbers. So-and-so has 1 million subscribers. He must be upon the truth. So-and-so has these amount of cars. He lives in this nice neighborhood. And Shaitan utilizes these methods in order to beguile and mislead the people. However, like we mentioned, it said, this gentleness that we're supposed to have, at the same time, clarifying the truth. This has to happen. We have to have what? وَلَيْسَ مَعْنَى الرِّفْقِ بِالنَّاسِ إِخْفَاء الْحَقِّ وَعَدَمْ بَيَانِ الْحَقِّ. And the meaning of what we just mentioned is clarifying the truth. The meaning of what we say, gentleness with the people, does not mean hiding the truth or concealing the truth. It does not mean that. Or not clarifying the truth of what it is. Or just gathering the people under the name of Islam generally, without clarifying what is correct from our belief, from that which is incorrect or in opposition to the correct one. All these devious sects. وَهُنَاكَ مِنْهَجٌ سَلِيمٌ. There is a sound methodology that we have to clarify. Except for verily the Ash'ariyah, the Ash'ariyah, they still believe what they believe. And you'll find that people still claim to this day that the people of the Sunnah. However, the waqi', the reality, testifies, no doubt, as we'll say what Shaykh al-Islam said, they're the closest of the groups to the people of the Sunnah, but they are not from them. وَلَيْسُوا مِنْهُمْ. They are not from them. However, from the closest to them. We repeat this ibadah in order, like we said, to mention to the people, to realize that, and in order to what? To realize that even at the same time, they look, sound, but these are the reasons why people become fooled. And we live in very trying times, brothers and sisters, where there are so many people, where the fitna of the Muslims, and to the point where now people are even coming in the cloak of Salafi. And they sound so close, but if you do not have usul, or you have proper understanding of your belief, you will be easily fooled, especially these days and times. These days and times are so trying. I feel very sorry for those who do not educate themselves, and they base what they take of positions, making it based upon their emotions. Because emotions are like storms. Emotions are extremely dangerous if they are not utilized properly in its proper place, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who controls them. If you submit yourself to His revelation, Allah will put reins, and He will put what? He will put those reins upon your emotions to restrain them, to make sure they don't get out of control. Because emotions are like storms. If you don't allow the Kitab and Sunnah to put strains on them so they can be conducted improperly. Because emotions will destroy you. And it can lead you to misguidance. And wallahi al-azim, I know it's a fitna on people. I know it is. But at the same time, you still cannot let your emotions blind you and blind your better judgment. Even though I know it's a fitna. Is it clear, everyone? And you, all of us, without any exception, Allah eventually will give all of us that type of test, male and female. Allah will give you a test to see whether or not you're going to put your emotions, give precedence to your mind or your emotions over what Allah says. Allah is going to confront you with that type of test to see what you're going to do. Are you going to put your emotions or your traditions or your customs or your family structure, something in front of you to see what road will you take? Are you going to accept the truth, or are you going to give that which is in opposition, giving that precedence and adopting that and accepting that? These are the affairs that all of us will be tested with. And these tests will continue to come until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the individual back to Him, meaning at death. That's the reality we have to live. We just have to swallow that pill and know that it's from Allah ta'ala. In order for a person, if they remain steadfast and patient, Allah will raise that one in degree and give them a tremendous great reward if that person remains firm. Is it clear, everyone? So you stop there. Any questions about the lesson? كل شيء واضح، ما هناك شيء غامض غير واضح تحتاج ونحتاج نزيدكم بيانا وإيضاحا. ما أدري إيش، هل هناك سؤال؟ هل من استفسار وسؤال؟ فليتفضل بسؤال، نستقبل الأسئلة. إذا كان هناك شيء غير واضح غامض خفي عليكم، تفضل شارك معنا يا إخواننا. شارك. Everybody, come on, participate. تفضل. Don't just say it's clear and it's not clear.
I don't know where the book.
You don't have the book. Don't bad. تفضل زيد. Anything? طيب. So put a mark on this page. We'll continue next week. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.